The wind howls. It's not a gentle breeze, but a knife-edged gale that cuts through the remote Alaskan wilderness. It carries with it the first promise of winter, the first whisper of starvation. But listen closely. Beneath the shriek of the wind, there is another sound. A low, guttural growl that vibrates not just through the air, but through the very earth. It's the sound of a primal, unthinking hunger. The camera lens is covered, a small black circle in a world of growing darkness. But the microphone is on. And for 6 long, agonizing minutes, it will capture a story that no one was ever meant to hear. The sound of a human life full of hope and a misguided love, being devoured by a force that knows no mercy. The sound of a woman's pleas, a man's screams, and the savage, tearing roar of a predator that is no longer an admired subject, but a relentless force of death. Something terrible has already happened, or is about to. You can feel the cold in your bones, the rising dread in your gut, because this isn't a story about a man who lived with bears. It's a story about a man who died by them. And the terrifying final moments of his life are captured on tape for all of us to hear. A terrifying piece of evidence that reminds us that nature is not a friend and that the wild has no heart. For over a decade, Timothy Treadwell sought to erase the line between man and beast. He was a self-styled bear whisperer, a man who saw himself as a protector of the great grizzlies of Alaska. His mission was simple, yet profound. To live among them, to film them, to show the world their true, gentle nature. He believed he had a special kinship with these creatures, a bond so powerful it would protect him from harm. He called the wild a sanctuary, an Eden free from the chaos and cruelty of the human world. He was a man who found his salvation in the eyes of a bear. But the wilderness is not a sanctuary. It is a place of brutal, unyielding indifference. The bears are not gentle giants. They are forces of nature, governed by instinct and hunger, and a bond forged on a camera lens is no match for the primal need to survive. This is the story of Timothy Treadwell, the man who dared to walk where no one should, and the brutal lesson he paid for his hubris. A lesson not just for him, but for all of us who dare to romanticize the wild. A chilling tale of a man who loved so deeply, he was blind to the very thing that would kill him. Timothy Treadwell was born on Long Island, New York, a world away from the vast, untamed wilderness of Alaska. As a child, he was a diver, a talented athlete who found grace and freedom in the water. But as he grew older, the pressures of the human world began to weigh on him. He struggled with addiction, a dark period in his life that he would later describe as a near-fatal spiral. He was, by his own admission, a man without a life, a lost soul adrift in a world he didn't understand. Then, in the late 1980s, after surviving a heroin overdose, he was urged by a friend to visit Alaska. And there, in the raw, majestic landscape of Katmai National Park, he had his first encounter with a wild grizzly bear. He described it as a moment of profound revelation. It was, he would later write, like looking into a mirror. He saw in the bear a reflection of his own untamed spirit, a raw power that he had lost. The experience changed him. He became sober, and his life, he believed, was now dedicated to a singular purpose, to protect and champion the bears. He founded an organization called Grizzly People. He wrote a book, Among Grizzlies, Living with Wild Bears in Alaska, detailing his experiences. He became a minor celebrity, appearing on talk shows and giving lectures. He was a charismatic and captivating figure, and his story resonated with many. He was a man who had found his calling, his purpose. He was no longer just Timothy Dexter from Long Island. He was Timothy Treadwell, the Grizzly Man. He lived out of a small tent. His only constant companions the bears and the video camera he used to document his every move. His life was a performance, a film of his own making, a testament to his belief that he had a special, almost mystical connection to these animals. He named the bears, he spoke to them in a soft, soothing voice, and he believed they responded in kind. He was the star of his own movie, a hero on a crusade to save the very creatures he was so dangerously close to. But what he saw as a crusade, others saw as a death wish. The coastal brown bear, often referred to as a grizzly in inland regions, is a magnificent and formidable creature. The grizzlies of Katmai National Park are among the largest in the world, with adult males weighing over 1,000 pounds. They are powerful omnivores, their diet ranging from sedges and roots to the rich, oily salmon that fill the Alaskan rivers in the summer. They are solitary creatures, territorial and fiercely protective of their young. They are not cuddly, gentle giants. They are, in the words of a park ranger, wild animals. Their behavior is governed by instinct. They are creatures of opportunity. When a food source is abundant, they are tolerant, even indifferent to human presence. But when that food source disappears, their behavior can change dramatically. They become more aggressive, more desperate, more dangerous. They are not malicious. They are not evil. They are simply hungry. Treadwell, in his own way, understood this. He spoke of the dangers. He warned others not to do what he did. But in his own mind, he was an exception to the rule. He was not just any human. He was a bear person. He had a sixth sense, an ability to read the subtle cues of their movements and their moods. He believed he knew when they were agitated, when they were content, and when they were hungry. But his knowledge was based on 13 summers of good luck. He had never truly been tested. The warnings from experts, from park rangers, from even his own friends, were nothing but background noise to his self-created reality. He was so convinced of his safety, so certain of his bond, that he willingly entered a situation that was a biological certainty for disaster. The first signs of trouble were subtle. The summer of 2003 was one of the worst in recent memory for salmon. The rivers were not teeming with life as they had been in previous years. The bears were thinner, their coats less lustrous. They were working harder to find food, and their patience was wearing thin. Timothy's own videos captured some of this. He would talk to the camera, his voice filled with concern for his friends. He would lament the lack of fish, the struggle the bears were facing. He knew things were different, but he refused to leave. He was there with his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, and in her private journals, a different story was being told, a story of fear. She wrote of the constant anxiety, of the feeling of being hunted. She was a woman trapped between her love for a man and her terror of the world he had created. She was a witness to his slow, methodical march towards his own destruction. There were near misses, close calls that Timothy would dismiss as minor incidents. He filmed himself being charged by a bear he called the Grinch, a surly animal he claimed to have turned away with a few stern words. He would speak of these incidents as triumphs, as proof of his special status. But they were, in fact, the final ignored warnings, the last red flags before the inevitable catastrophe. He was a man standing at the edge of a cliff, convinced he could fly. The final terrifying detail of the escalation was a bear Timothy had never seen before. A large, old male, a bear that didn't know him, that didn't have a history with him, a bear that wasn't a friend or a neighbor with a human name. This bear was a blank slate, a creature with no past history of human tolerance. This was the bear that would walk a bear trail through Timothy's final campsite. This was the bear that would be hungry. This was the bear that would not care about a man with a camera and a dream. October 5, 2003. The air was thick with the scent of impending snow. Timothy and Amy were at their remote campsite near Kaflia Bay, in a place he had ironically named the Grizzly Maze. It was a fitting name, a labyrinth of trails heavily used by bears, a place where they should never have been camping, especially so late in the season. A light, cold rain was falling. The low clouds clung to the mountains, and the world was muted, gray, and heavy with foreboding. Around 4 p.m., Timothy made a satellite phone call to his associate in California. He said everything was fine. He spoke of the bears, his voice full of its usual enthusiasm. He said they were leaving the next day. The call ended. Sometime after, the sounds on the tape began. The camera was turned on, its lens cap still in place. The audio starts with the familiar sound of the wind, the soft patter of rain, and then a sound that rips through the tranquility. A scream. A man's scream full of pain and a dawning, terrible realization. "Get out here, I'm getting killed." Timothy's voice. the sounds of a violent, frantic struggle. The crunch of bones, the deep guttural roar of a grizzly. The sounds on the tape are a blur of chaos and horror. Amy's voice, a terrified counterpoint to the savage violence. "Play dead, Timothy! Play dead!" she screams. Her voice is filled with a raw, visceral fear. She is trying to help, trying to remember what the experts say to do. But Timothy is not a person playing dead. He is a person being torn apart. The sounds of her own struggle, her own brave but futile efforts to fight off the beast, the sickening thud of her body as she is thrown. Her screams join his, a chorus of pure, unadulterated terror. He begs her to hit the bear. She screams for him to fight back. Their pleas and commands are a heartbreaking contradiction. They are no longer the grizzly man and his companion. They are just two people dying alone in the cold, wet wilderness. The last sound on the tape is a fading gurgle, followed by silence. The audio tape runs out, cutting off the final unrecorded moments of their lives. The call came in the next day, a cold, clear Monday. The pilot, Willie Fulton, arrived at the campsite to pick up the couple. What he found was not a camp, but a scene of carnage. He saw a bear, a large, aggressive boar, standing over a pile of what looked like human remains, a twisted mound of torn clothing and flesh. The tent was a mangled mess of fabric and poles. Fulton, a man who had seen his share of tragedy in the Alaskan bush, knew instantly what had happened. He did not land. He did not approach. He radioed for help, his voice tight with alarm. "I think there's been a mauling. There's a bear on top of a body." The response was swift. Park rangers, armed with shotguns, arrived at the scene. They were trained for this. They knew the rules. When a bear becomes a predator, when it loses its fear of humans and associates them with food, it must be put down. They found the large grizzly at the campsite, still guarding the remains. It showed no fear. It was not a wild animal to be admired. It was a danger, a threat to every human being who might ever walk that land. They shot and killed it. Another younger bear, a 2-year-old, charged them from the brush. They killed it too. A mercy killing of a bear that had been conditioned to see humans not as a threat, but as an opportunity for food. The search for the remains was a gruesome, heartbreaking affair. They found Timothy's mangled head, a partial spine, and one of his hands, still wearing his wristwatch. They found Amy's partial remains, a body that had been partially buried in a mound of earth and twigs, a common practice for bears that have killed their prey. The scene was one of total destruction, a testament to the brutal, savage finality of the wild. The news of the attack sent a ripple of shock and horror across the globe. The story of Timothy Treadwell, the man who had lived with bears and was killed by them, was too sensational to ignore. The media descended. The local papers, the national news, the tabloids. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. Was he a hero or a fool, a martyr or a madman? The debate raged, fueled by the horrifying revelation of the audio tape. An autopsy was performed on the large male grizzly. The results were conclusive. Human remains were found in its stomach, confirming it was the bear that had killed and partially consumed the couple. This was not a random attack. This was a predatory kill. A bear that had, for whatever reason, decided that humans were a food source. The young bear, too, was found to have traces of human tissue in its system, suggesting it had either participated in the attack or scavenged after the fact. The 2 bears were cremated. There remains a final grim punctuation mark on the story. Werner Herzog, the renowned documentary filmmaker, was already interested in Treadwell's story. He had watched some of his footage and was captivated by the man's blend of passion, madness, and unshakable belief. The death, and especially the audio tape, gave the story a new, terrifying dimension. Herzog, in his masterful documentary, Grizzly Man, used Timothy's own footage, his own words, his own life, to tell the story of his death. He used interviews with people who knew him, from his friends and family, to the park rangers who had warned him for years. Herzog's narration is a poetic, yet chilling counterpoint to Treadwell's manic enthusiasm. He sees a man who tried to transcend his own humanity, to become a part of a world that would never accept him. He sees a man who was so filled with a deep, abiding love for nature that he was blind to its most fundamental truth. The story of Timothy Treadwell is not a fairy tale. It is not a story of a man and his animal friends. It is a tragedy. A story about the line that divides humanity from the wild. A line that Timothy Treadwell tried desperately to erase. He was a man who escaped the chaos of human society and found solace in the wilderness. He saw in the bears a kind of purity, a rawness that he believed was lacking in himself and in the world around him. He wanted to believe that he could be one of them, a creature of pure instinct, free from the messy, complicated emotions of humanity. But he was wrong. He was never a bear. He was always a man with a camera, a man with a past, a man with a dream. He was a human being, with all the frailties and follies that come with it. And in the end, it was that very humanity that failed him. He was a feast for a beast, a meal for a creature that saw no difference between him and a salmon. He died not for a cause, but because of a miscalculation, a profound and ultimately fatal misunderstanding of the world he loved. His death, and the death of Amy, is a brutal, haunting reminder that nature is not a benevolent force. It is a force of indifference, of pure, unthinking existence. A force that will kill you not out of malice, but out of hunger. And the audio tape, that final, horrifying document of their last moments, is a chilling testament to that truth. A scream in the wilderness, heard by no one. A sound that proves that no matter how much you love a monster, it will always be a monster. And sometimes it will be hungry.